Welcome to the Poisoner's Almanac. I'm your co-host, Adam. Thank you guys so much for all of the 5-star reviews you guys are leaving. We really appreciate that. That helps out our podcast so much. It pushes the podcast further into the Spotify algorithm so that more people like you can find it and enjoy it just like you do. Also, I want to let you know that monthly support is available for this podcast. We have a single monthly supporter right now by the name of Carl Ziegler Jr. Thank you very much, Carl. We appreciate that. We are going to shout out our monthly supporters every episode from here on out, whether it's the intro or the outro, what have you. But we're going to mention you guys by name on this podcast as a thank you for allowing us to create the podcast more ably and to an even deeper level with your financial support. So thanks
I like
in
that
advance.
name too.
Yeah.
It's a good name.
Carl Ziegler Jr. Sounds like you're big time, Carl.
Yeah.
Never met you, but you sound like somebody we need to know.
Sounds like a Ghostbuster. I like Ghostbusters.
Don't cross the streams.
Great. Bankman.
Oh man. You're right. So monthly support is available for this podcast. Also, Becca and I have brainstormed, kicked around the idea of either doing a Patreon where you have monthly subscriptions, which will include a deeper level of content, or maybe doing subscriptions through the Spotify platform where we could also include a deeper layer of content. And, we haven't decided on anything yet, but Becca is so good with her research. I witness this stuff every day, y'all. She is so detailed, so careful, so diligent. And obviously, you guys hear the results here on the podcast. She's fantastic.
It's called hyperfocus.
It's called hyperfocus. It's literally her brain doing this.
I don't go anywhere. This is my life.
Yeah. So we just want to turn her loose on a deeper level of content, possibly, if our listeners are interested in that. So maybe it's a Patreon, maybe it's subscriptions on the Spotify platform. We're not sure, but just let us know on our socials, on the Poisoner's Almanac Spotify account, which there are links to that to follow that account in the show notes. Send us a DM over there or comment on one of the posts and let us know, hey, I would totally be down to be a Patreon supporter or be a monthly subscriber to get into that subscriber feed you guys are thinking about doing. That
also,
kind of stuff.
ideas about what you would like to see, hear about, things like that.
Absolutely. And we get ideas from comments when we post about the podcast
or
on
stories.
socials.
If you have any personal stories.
If you have poisoned someone, we'd love to hear about it. Also, we're going to record it and send it to the police.
I ain't no snitch.
I ain't no snitch, she said, Your Honor. So anyways, everybody, let us know what you think about all that. But overall, your listenership all by itself is more than enough for us. We just want you to know that. Thank you so much for listening. And let's get into the episode. Hey, everybody. This is your co-host, Adam.
I'm Rebecca.
My dear, I'm so excited about today's episode because you're already laughing because you know why. Because you have devoured a book titled Radium Girls. Am I right?
Yes, by Kate Moore, I believe.
By Kate Moore.
Yep.
Okay. Let me tell y'all, Becca has been feverishly devouring the pages of this book, highlighting the bejesus out of it, and trying to extract and curate and condense.
Marie Curie. Yeah.
Curate.
Look,
and condense and streamline the content of this book so that she may deliver a work of art to you all. And while she was reading this book, like every 10 minutes, she would look up at me and say, use some sort of profanity and just a disbelief over the behavior of certain individuals.
It's rage-inducing.
Rage-inducing.
There's a lot of injustice.
Radium, even.
Oh my God. That was so many Curies of stupid. But we'll get into that.
Okay. So obviously today we're dealing with radium.
Radium.
And this is going to be part 1 of what we estimate to be 3 parts total.
See.
Becca has put together...
Okay, I was planning... Okay, I was writing my notes out. I basically hyper-focused all weekend just on it. Didn't realize how much time had gone by until the day was gone. And today I looked at how many pages my notes were, thinking that I had written like, I don't know, 5-6 pages of notes. No, it was 33 pages. And I'm not done with the entire thing. So I figured it might need to be more than one part. Well, you thought it needed to be more than one part. So
yeah. Because I don't want any of your research to go to waste. It's like, I know where the talent is on this podcast. You know what I'm saying?
But this one is definitely, this one's definitely a lot. And the story that we're telling with it is a lot. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it kind of goes along with what's going on a little bit today with the whole overruling of Chevron. And
oh man,
if you haven't heard about that, look it up.
It plays into it.
There's a lot of, some of this kind of plays into that when it comes to regulating dangerous substances and things like that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so radium. You ready to talk about radium?
Lay it on us, my dear.
Well, you don't want this laid on you.
Okay.
Now, radium, element number 88 on the periodic table. If you have one handy, everyone should have a periodic table.
I mean, who doesn't? Come on.
Yes.
Well, I'm not an animal.
I have one in my house in Animal Crossing too.
Do you really?
Yeah, it is on the wall.
Oh my gosh.
It's amazing. Anyway, so this element was discovered by the famous French-Polish scientist Marie Curie and her husband Pierre in 1898. If you remember that name, we also talked a little bit about them when we were discussing polonium.
Yes.
So there's some, ties to this. Its name comes from the Latin radius, meaning ray. Radium emits energy in the form of rays, so that's where that comes from.
Okay.
Marie Curie would often call it my beautiful radium. It was really a big discovery for her. In fact, I'm pretty sure she won a Nobel Prize for the discovery of polonium and radium.
Yes.
So, yeah, it literally glowed and gleamed, and they were discovering more and more about it every day. Now, in nature, it is found in uranium ores and sometimes thorium ores. There are 33 isotopes known, and all of them are radioactive and dangerous. 1 ton of pitchblende, which we discussed last time, is uraninite. Another name for it is uraninite. Typically yields about 1/7 of a gram of radium. So 1 kilogram of the Earth's crust contains about 900 picograms of radium, and a liter of seawater contains about 89 femtograms of radium. So it's pretty rare. It's,
Okay.
Now, fun fact, the unit used for radioactivities is Curies, after the Curies.
I love that so much. I love it anytime you fun fact. You guys need to know, like, the way my wife is neurodivergent, the way that she flirts is fun facting. So if she shares a fun fact with me, it's only because she's coming on to me. So as you were.
Oh, well. Now, over time, the Curies discovered more about this element, including that it made an impression on photographic plates through black paper. And it corroded and little by little reduced to powder the paper or cotton wool in which it was wrapped. I mean, that should have been a clue as to it being pretty dangerous. But hey, we're only just beginning.
It doesn't combust, but it degrades other substances. I mean, come on, guys.
Yeah. Now, when it was discovered, it was thought of as some sort of miracle. Many people were enthralled with it, including Marie herself. Some even believed its discovery was predicted by the Bible, referencing
Oh, I can't wait to hear this.
referencing Malachi 4:2. The Son of Righteousness shall arise with healing in his wings, and ye shall go forth and gambol as calves of the stall. Gambol. That's a fun word. It's like, this is not a gamble you want to take, but
No.
here we are.
I grew up in church, so I know every.
I'm guessing that's the KJV. It has ye. Ye before ye,
That's gotta be
except after
KJV.
they. The. I don't know. I didn't grow up in church.
Did you just make that up?
No. I've heard that somewhere, but I think I said it wrong. Because I didn't.
It sounded great.
I didn't grow up in church myself.
Yeah.
Sunday school here and there.
Mm-hmm.
Learned pretty quick that you get candy for memorizing things.
There you have it.
So, now Pierre discovered its ability to kill cells when he attached a vial of it to his arm for 10 hours, resulting in a skin lesion. This is how they did science back then, okay?
Jesus Christ.
If you want that Nobel Prize, you better be willing to die for it.
It's going to cost you.
He had surely heard the story of his friend, French physicist Antoine Becquerel. I have not
thought his name was Shirley.
Wow.
Sorry.
Antoine Becquerel? Anyway, it's French. Who developed a lovely ulcer after carrying a small ampule of radium in his pocket for a good 6 hours. So he was just walking around with it in his pocket. Next thing you know, he's like, what is this? I got this awful skin thing.
I urge you.
And it was doing this through the ampule. It's not like he had it right against his chest, right?
Yeah.
So it was basically hailed as a cure-all, though. Even for such things as constipation, hay fever, gout. They were using lots of things to try to treat constipation. It's like,
I'm sorry. We both work in healthcare. Like when you just first thing you mentioned is constipation. Like I can just imagine radium is helping your constipation because, well, it's dissolving your intestines.
Just wait till the summer when everybody gets all the poisoning and the food poisoning and the bacteria stuff. Then you'll all have diarrhea and that'll be fine.
I can't wait for season 2. Let's do this.
Anyway. So radioactive dressings and pills were also sold in pharmacies, and radium was even put in as an additive in toothpastes, hair creams, face creams, and even foods and drinks. There was actually something called radium water under health brands named Radithor and Revigator. Now, these solutions were not created by a medical doctor, but were supposed to be able to cure all sorts of issues, including impotence, and were and were advertised as a cure for the living dead and perpetual sunshine. I mean, it glowed. Remember what we talked about last week, though? If it glows, it blows. Because they, for some reason, a lot of them considered like the fact that it would literally glow, like it was giving off light. It must be something good.
That's what that's referring to?
Part of it. Now, the other part of it is the fact that because it could harm cells, it was able to kill cancerous cells.
Oh.
And so, like, they thought, well, if it's helping with cancer, then it must be good for everything.
Oh no!
But in reality, it can also hurt healthy.
Killing all cells.
It can kill. Yeah, it can damage your cells.
You said it mentioned he figured out how it could kill cells. Like, is cell biology a thing?
No, he just knows that it can hurt against your skin.
Okay.
But then
it's like caustic.
Right. But then it's radiation. It's literally radiation.
Did they describe it that way? This is radiation.
Well, yeah. They know what radiation is at this point. They're looking at radioactive substances at this point and trying to figure out ways to use them and things like that. But yeah, they didn't understand it fully, obviously, because they're like, yeah, we can just drink water with this stuff in it, and it would be great.
This is gonna ruin the tour.
Definitely gonna ruin the tour. Now, I hope I'm saying this name right. Eben Byers was an American socialite and golfer. He was a big fan of Radithor waters, the radium waters, between 1927 and 1930. He actually ended up dying in 1932 from various cancers because of the stuff. And he was drinking like thousands of bottles of this stuff.
Oh, no.
And he was buried in a lead-lined coffin.
Now, why did they take the measure of burying him in the lead coffin?
Because he's still giving off
radiation.
Oh, okay. Radium has a half-life of about 1,600 years.
Oh, okay.
Well, this particular radium, this particular isotope. So, and we'll go over some of that too later. He was exhumed in 1965 to be studied, and his remains were still very much radioactive.
Oh my God.
So,
Okay.
yeah. Now, radium-lined jars were also sold to the wealthy, so they could put water in them and then turn it into radium water. So, like, radium-lined jars, you put water in it, it like radiates the water.
Okay.
But the wealthy had that.
Of course. You can't even afford a regular jar, let alone a radium jar.
I love that guy so much.
Why? Because you're poor.
Shabazz is amazing. Now, it was being advertised to drink this tonic like 5 to 6 times a day. So, but these cost upwards of like $200 back then, which would be about $3,700 today.
Yeah. A bottle?
No, I think it's like a radium lined jars. So like I don't know how long one would last for.
$3,700.
Yeah.
That would get you half of a decent car right now.
Maybe. There were also spas that used radium water in other places like Japan, Germany, Austria, Czech Republic, Ukraine, and Belarus. Here in America, nasal radium was administered to kids to prevent ear or tonsil infections.
Oh, well.
Literally just shooting it straight up there. So,
talk about a trade-off.
This is actually taking place still between the 1940s and 1970s in some places. So, here we are. Radium was painted in places intended to glow. And some companies claim to sell radium jock straps.
Okay.
Radium lingerie.
Okay.
Radium butter. Not sure why you need butter to glow, but radium milk. And radium cosmetics, such as powders and creams that you could wear. Now, some of these were scams that had no actual radium, but you get the idea.
Kidding.
You get the idea of how popular this was.
All I can think of is that the Snow song that they sing in White Christmas on the Train. I want to wash my hands and face and hair with snow.
That is such a weird line.
Except you exchange snow for radium.
Well, there's actually a song I'm going to mention too. I'm not going to sing it because I don't know. I don't have the lyrics of this song, but there was a song during this time called Radium Dance that came out with the musical Piff, Paff, Poof. And I'm saying that because it has question marks at the end of each word. So I'm not questioning what it's called. That's what it's called.
Your inflection is purposeful.
Yes. It was also used in pesticides, though these were somehow supposed to be harmless to humans. Okay.
Oh, yes, of course.
In 1904, Dr. Howard Atwood Kelly, one of the founders of Johns Hopkins Hospital, was the first to use radium to treat a cancer patient. He treated his aunt.
Well,
she actually died after surgery, however. In fact, many of his patients would go on to die of radium exposure. You ever heard of Henrietta Lacks?
Mm-mm.
She was actually...
Sorry.
Your knowledge of her, apparently. She was actually treated this way as well. She was a Black woman who was treated at Johns Hopkins Hospital in 1951. This was the only place at the time near her that would see Black patients.
Oh, wow.
And she was treated for cervical cancer, and her doctors used radium tube inserts because this is what they had as the treatment at that time, or were trying to use at that time.
It's not that far off from what chemo is.
Or radiation. I mean, yeah. I mean,
that's a good point.
Yeah.
Did it help her?
Well, we're getting to that.
Okay.
When she returned for her follow-up, they also removed and saved some of her cells from her cervix, some healthy and some cancerous, for future study. But they did this without her knowledge or her consent.
Oh, no.
Now, at this time, though, like we would consider that a disregard for patient rights. But at this time, it wasn't considered necessary to receive consent.
Oh, no. Especially not for a minority.
Or women or anything,
exactly.
you know.
She's a double whammy minority.
So, but these cancer cells would become the first immortalized cell line used in medical research for years down the line.
Oh my God.
Yes. She's famous for this.
She found out later.
Well, unfortunately, she actually died in 1951 at 31 years old after her cancer metastasized throughout her entire body. So that was unfortunate. But they also never they didn't tell her family And her family was never compensated or anything for the use of those cells. Yeah, they didn't know about it until like 1975. So
Mercy.
I did go to the Johns Hopkins website, and I'm just going to read what they say on their website.
Yeah.
Says, among the important scientific discoveries of the last century was the first immortal human cell line known as HeLa, a remarkably durable and prolific line of cells obtained during the treatment of Henrietta's cancer by John Hopkins researcher Dr. George Gay in 1951. Although these were the first cells that could be easily shared and multiplied in a lab setting, Johns Hopkins has never sold or profited from the discovery or distribution of HeLa cells and does not own the rights to the HeLa cell line. Rather, Johns Hopkins offered HeLa cells freely and widely for scientific research. Over the past several decades, this cell line has contributed to many medical breakthroughs, from research on the effects of zero gravity in outer space and the development of polio and COVID-19 vaccines to the study of leukemia, the AIDS virus, and cancer worldwide. Although many other cell lines are in use today, HeLa cells have supported advances in most fields of medical research in the years since HeLa cells were isolated. So,
wow.
Obviously, looking back, it's wrong to do that to someone, take their stuff, never compensate their family, even though the world has literally benefited from this woman's cells. But thank you, Henrietta.
She should have a statue out front of the building.
She should, yeah.
My goodness.
Yeah. Now, another use for radium after its discovery was in self-luminous paints for watches, nuclear panels, aircraft switches, gun sights, compasses, clocks, and instrument dials. Now, I want to discuss another sad, I should say, but important story involving radium that most refer to as the Radium Girls. And this honestly wasn't, well, to me, it wasn't that long ago. It was still in the 1900s. I was born in the 1900s, okay? So for me, this doesn't feel like that long ago. Over 100 years, sure, but still. Now, beginning in 1916, watch dial factory jobs drew in these young girls to paint the dials so that they would glow in the dark. This would help people to tell time when it was dark, obviously, and would be of great use when America entered into World War I the next year. One factory was at the Radium Luminous Materials Corporation in Newark, New Jersey, where a young girl named Catherine Schaub started working. Might be Schaub. Schaub.
I've heard it pronounced Schaub. Is it Schaub?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that's pronounced Schaub.
Schaub. Okay.
Yeah. I only know that because of Matthew Schaub, who was an NFL quarterback.
You know what? See, sports comes in handy, I suppose.
There you go.
She was 14 when she started working here and was excited because it was known to be one of the more glamorous jobs since it involved what was known as the wonder substance at the time. Here, a small amount of radium was mixed with zinc sulfide to provide a yellowish powder that glowed. The girls were taught to use very fine camel hair brushes to dip into the powder into tiny water-filled bowls. They would have some like gum arabic for an adhesive, so that this paint that they were making with it, also known as undark at the time, that's what they called it.
Clever.
Yeah, they literally trademarked it and everything.
Not dark.
Undark. Could be applied to trace the itty-bitty numbers on the dials. Now, the smallest watch would have only been like 3.5 centimeters across the face. So they're painting the numbers on here to make sure they can see.
Yeah, it's very tedious. Yeah.
The girls had to be precise with every stroke or they would get in trouble. One trouble they ran into was the brush hairs would spread, making the painting difficult. To make the brushes thin and pointy again, they would use their mouths to point them, something they termed lip pointing.
Yep.
Another problem was the radium paint accumulated and would harden on the brushes. So this lip dip paint method apparently helped with that as well. However, as you can imagine, this meant that they were ingesting the paint.
Yep.
Some would even say later that they remembered the grittiness of it, like they remembered putting it on. Anyway.
Wow.
But remember, they were saying this stuff is actually healthy for you. So.
Sure.
Whatever.
Oh, man.
They were actually getting it all over them, as the powder often made a yellow haze in the room. It would fall on their hair, their skin, their dresses. It would get everywhere. They would literally dust them off after work, apparently, and like they would scoop that bit up and use it for the next day.
Okay.
So, because they didn't want to waste it because it cost a good bit of money.
And one might say, where is OSHA? Well, it doesn't exist, friends.
Oh, dear.
Stay tuned.
So, once America joined World War I, the plant moved to Orange, New Jersey, where it had a larger studio for more dial painters to fulfill the higher demand, as well as an on-site laboratory. The girls had asked studio management, a Mr. Savoy at the time, if the stuff would hurt them, and he told them that it would not, and that if anything, it would be beneficial to them.
Wow.
The founders of the company were doctors George Willis and an Austrian-born doctor named Dr. Sabin von Sochocki, who had actually studied under the Curies at one time. And he spent most of his time in the corporation's lab making this powder used for the paint. And he also did some like research and development, but he's basically the inventor of this undark sort of paint.
Right.
You know, the chemistry of it.
Wow.
It is interesting to note that many of the lab workers were supplied with protective equipment such as lead-lined aprons and ivory forceps to handle vials of radium.
Oh my God. I just put that together. Like, they knew.
Dr. Sochocki himself said that radium should be handled, quote unquote, only by taking the greatest precautions. He knew the substance could destroy healthy tissues and had even cut off the tip of his own finger after it had been contaminated.
What?
Yeah.
Is that one of the parts where you looked up and were like, this son of a...
Well, it gets worse.
Okay, great.
Now, wages-wise, the girls were paid about 1.5 cents per watch painted. So they were paid per timepiece they were able to paint.
Productivity, huh?
Yeah.
Not an hourly.
No. So they tried to do as many as they could while there. Now, the quickest girls were making more than 3 times a typical factory worker at this time, and sometimes more than their own fathers.
Oh.
On average, they were taking home about $20, which would be about $370 today a week. And the best at the job were earning 2 to 3 times that.
What?
So you can see how tempting the job was if you're good at it, right?
Yo.
They were given a set amount of powder for paint each day and were not allowed to ask for more. When those running the show noticed that the water bowls were getting cloudy with the sediment even, they would like take away the water. Like, yeah. So then you had to lip point at this point because now you don't have water to rinse it off.
Mercy.
Yeah. They didn't want to waste it, apparently. They would literally go home glowing because it was all over them. And after a while, since they had been assured that it was not going to hurt them, they even began to play with the paint, using it as eyeshadow, nail polish, lipstick. One girl put it all over her teeth to make her smile bright before a date. Like, they were messing with it. They were told that it would, if anything, it would benefit them. Some would draw mustaches on themselves for a laugh. Some girls would wear their nice dresses so they could end up glowing. It was a very social sort of place, and the company hosted picnics and ice cream dates and such. A lot of these girls were coming to the age of finding suitors, you know, thinking about marriage and such. And when I say at this age, I'm thinking like 18, 19, back in the day when it was like, I'm going to get married. And these days it's like, no, like not till later, please. Now some still get married early, but I feel like these days, like it's more of a
much later in life.
Yeah, like and there's nothing wrong with that. Like I am glad that I waited because I don't think my judgment was very good at all around that age.
We needed to meet each other at the time that we did.
But hey, we're all different, so. Okay. Now, being a dial painter was also a glamorous job at this time. And most of these were teenagers, like 14. Some of them were upwards of like 20, 21. So, but a lot of them became best friends working there.
Yeah.
And a lot of girls envied this sort of job because they wanted to work there because it was so glamorous.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the one girl I mentioned earlier, Catherine Schaub, she went to see her doctor for skin trouble after noticing some of the adverse reactions that a few other dial painters had, such as sores in their mouths and such. She noticed she had some changes in her skin, so she was going to go check it out.
Mm-hmm.
The doctor did note changes in her blood and asked Catherine if she had been working with phosphorus, which at that time was a well-known industrial poison. Remember the matchstick girls from last episode with the Fossy jaw? She told her coworkers about the visit, and they asked Mr. Savoy again about any possible harmful substances in the paint. He reassured them and had the founders, Dr. Willis and Sochaki, come down to do the same. They basically taught the girls about radium and told them that they would not be harmed by the tiny amount that was in the paint they were using. And all I can see in my head is them like mansplaining this whole like,
oh my God,
it's fine. You know, you're just being hysterical.
Yeah. Even though they're wearing lead-lined
in the laboratory,
PPE.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
So, yeah. The matter dismissed, Catherine would get her cousin, Irene Rudolph, a job in the studio as well. Like, she was like, hey, I got her a job. Come work here with us. It's great. Later, however, Dr. Sochaki would randomly walk through the studio of dowel painters and stop when he saw another girl, Grace Fryer, using the lip pointing method. She's basically putting the radium laced brush in her mouth. And he stopped and told her, don't do that. You will get sick.
Whoops.
She later mentioned the matter.
Is he a Boeing whistleblower?
He's mostly in the lab, so I don't think he's paying that much attention. I don't think he's paying attention that much. So, or maybe he's just ignoring it. I don't know. She later mentioned the matter to Miss Rooney, the forelady at the studio, but was told to ignore it and to get back to work as she had been. Dr. Sochaki himself was known for being reckless with the stuff, sometimes immersing his arms into radium solutions. Just being careless.
Okay.
Even though he knows, like, this stuff isn't great.
Yeah.
Now, on November 11th, 1918, the war came to an end. Some dial painters moved on not too long after, including Quinta Maggia, who was at this point 18, who left in February 1919 after getting married. Her sisters, Albina, was 21. She was 21 when she joined, and at this point she's 23. And Amelia, or Molly as they called her, was now 21. They stayed on, though Albina would later leave too. So there's a lot of coming and going here.
Yeah.
Those who left were easily replaced by such girls as Sarah Malifer and her sister Marguerite Carlo. And I said they have different last names because Sarah got married. So, but they were sisters.
Okay.
So Chalky and others in the lab began experimenting with the paint recipe to keep costs down, and eventually settled on varying mixtures.
As if they're not making a truckload of money.
Oh, yeah, they're making money for sure. But they basically settled on this mixture of radium-228, which is also known as mesothorium, and radium-226. So it's just like a couple different isotopes they're messing with. Chemistry stuff.
By the way, you said mesothorium. Yeah, thorium is the name of a fuel for nuclear reactors.
Yeah, well, I mentioned thorium earlier. Thorium ore, too, is a thing. So, yeah. Now, the girls were given cloths at one point to dab their brushes on to prevent the need for lip pointing, but they were taken away once management felt this was wasting paint.
Wow.
So, Catherine Schaub, the girl who had seen the doctor about skin troubles earlier, was 18 now and beginning to feel fatigued and was dealing with cracking and stiffness in her legs. Now, she put it down to the amount of work she was doing and to grief as her mother had just passed away. But, I mean, she's 18. She's a bit young for... And I understand people worked long hours. You know, life was harder back then, but still. In 1921, there was a company takeover that resulted from one of the founders selling a large portion of stock to their treasurer at the time. His name was Arthur Roeder. Roeder became president of the company, and it was renamed the United States Radium Corporation. And all this is going to be important in the later parts.
Oh, yes. I'm kind of mentally cataloging these names. because I
Yes.
feel like.
And I'll make sure to remind you who these people are too in the future. But all this is kind of important for what's coming. Now, the U.S. Radium Corporation had a trademark, like I said earlier, on its undark paint, and actually started to sell
The way you said it that time, that's perfect. Undark.
Undark. That they actually started to sell the paint itself to anyone who wanted to apply it themselves, like to manufacturers or just regular lay people.
People should have the right to poison themselves slowly.
Well, yeah, we still do.
We still do.
If you think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, alcohol is a poison. Don't get me wrong.
Just about
I
to
have a
say.
drink every now and then, and but it is considered a poison.
That's true.
The
dose makes the poison, Rebecca.
Okay. It does, though. It really does. I mean, water can kill you.
Yeah, right. Sorry. I'm not trying to distract you.
Here we are. In a different way.
You're about to be like, did you know Roman concrete was made with limestone?
Okay, look. It's an interesting fact.
Okay.
May not be relevant to what we're talking about now, but
when has that mattered?
Now, just so you know, this factory was set up in a residential area. And the residents had actually started to complain about the fumes from the plant because it was messing up their laundry. It was changing their laundry, the color of their laundry.
Mm-hmm.
I guess because they had them outside,
Yeah.
on the lines. And it was making them sick. Or they said it was making them sick. The company would continue to deny that anything that they were doing was making anybody sick.
Wow.
Now, the company decided to set up shop in these office studios within watch factories, such as Waterbury Clock Company in Connecticut. So, like, just go ahead and move, their teams to like actual watch factories, so they could just quickly make the watches or the whatever they're building clocks.
To have the assembly process all done in the same location.
Right.
To cut costs.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing.
Now, this also decreased the need for dial painters in orange, but the company's profits would continue to rise, and they would get rid of the complaining people,
Mm-hmm.
So
they've got a whole new crop of people who are not yet sick.
Well, even the ones that were there don't know what's going on yet.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's right.
Now, some dial painters, such as Edna Bowles, well, it's Edna Bowles' husband because she would eventually get married as well. And I'm trying to keep these names easy to remember by not like changing the last name without telling you they got married.
Okay.
So Edna Bowles' husband went to work for another dial painting plant in the area called Luminite. Catherine Shaw would move on to work at a roller bearing factory before going back to dial painting at the Radium Corporation to help train others at the time. Mm-hmm. So she kind of went back and forth. Then she would later join Edna at Luminite, so another radium place.
Mm-hmm.
Another dial painter, Helen Quinlan, left to be a typist. Grace Fryer, the girl that Dr. Sachaki told to not do that, moved on as well and started working at a bank. Molly Maja was one of the few remaining girls still at the Radium Corporation, along with Hazel Vincent and Marguerite Carlo. I believe Hazel Vincent Kuser is the name she takes on after getting married. Marguerite Carlo had joined after the war, so she was also there. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't be long that the three of them started feeling rather poorly.
Okay.
Marguerite was exhausted but carried on. Hazel, who had been one of the original painters, decided to leave after feeling completely burned out. And these are all young girls still, like teenagers, maybe into early 20s at the most.
Yeah.
None of them thought anything of it being because of where they worked, though. At this point, residue from the radium extraction was being used at schools and playgrounds because of its resemblance to sand.
Oh, dear.
Mm-hmm. It was believed to be hygienic. And you have to remember, people were literally going to radium spas, too. So they thought, like, this is great. Although I did hear it, like, in the book, she mentions, like, there was a boy that was playing and told his mom, oh, my fingers are tingling or burning after playing in it. So not a good idea. If it glows, it blows. Molly Maja was having worse problems. She had been seeing a dentist for horrible jaw and gum pains, and she'd been having teeth removed. But the gums refused to heal from these extractions, and she only seemed to be getting worse. The pain was terrible, and so was her breath because of the ulcers and infections.
Oh, no.
She also started having pain in her hips and feet and was told she likely had rheumatism, and simply given aspirin when she visited the doctor. Now, if you're a woman, you've been to a doctor, you're probably shaking your head right now being like,
Yeah.
Even back then. It's still like that now sometimes. Now, her teeth eventually started falling out on their own, and the doctors and dentists' visits were causing her family a lot of financial distress, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
She was actually tested for syphilis, and the test was negative. Like, they're just trying to test her for everything at this point, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And she suffered greatly while the doctors were just perplexed. Her dentist had been wondering if she had phosphorus poisoning, similar to Catherine Schaub's dentist at one point, and she went to the doctor or dentist. He even went to the Radium Corporation to ask for the formula used to make the paint, and he was refused because, it's top secret.
Okay.
He's not asking to steal it. He's just trying to see what's wrong with his patient.
So awful.
He was told, however, that no phosphorus was used and that their paint was harmless. Around this time, it was also reported in a local paper that radium could be eaten and that the world may come to see radium tablets that could prolong life. Oh, dear.
We have longitudinal data that proves it. I love it, man.
Go play in those sandboxes, kids.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Molly's condition became so bad that she had to quit working. And on a subsequent visit to her dentist, her jawbone literally broke at his touch. He literally removed it right there in the office with no need for operation. He literally just took it out of her mouth.
I've heard about that instance. You're talking about her entire jawbone.
Like, yeah, just took it right out.
That is so awful.
Yeah. More of her jaw would be removed later, and she was in constant pain. She also became anemic, which made her weaker, of course. She was retested for syphilis. They just keep testing her for syphilis. So this time, the syphilis test came back positive for some reason. But in no way did she have syphilis. There's literally no way
I'm
she had
immediately thinking about what can... It's like the whole specificity, sensitivity deal with testing.
Now, the pain in her mouth began to move to her throat. And soon after this, on September 12th, 1922, she actually hemorrhaged blood into her mouth, likely from her jugular vein that had been eaten through, and she died.
God.
She was only 24 years old. Her cause of death was listed as syphilis.
Oh, no.
So, now, today we know pretty much how radium acts in the body. So I'm going to go over that for a minute, and then we'll go back to the girls.
Okay.
Now, the human body mistakes radium for calcium, and as such, it deposits it into the bones.
Mm-hmm.
Now, unlike calcium, which helps strengthen bones, radium degrades them. It damages the bone marrow, leading to anemia and abnormal blood cell counts.
Yeah.
And there is no getting it out of the bones. And radium-226, the isotope found in the paint, has a half-life of 1,600 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they thought it was... Another reason they thought it was healthy for people was they would see that it stimulated, like, red blood cells at first, because it would go straight to the bones, and it would cause the marrow, to just sort of be super active.
Spike?
Yeah.
Oh.
But then over time,
it kills the bone marrow.
Yeah, it just destroys.
Oh my God. Okay.
So, yeah. Now back to the girls. Irene Rudolph, Catherine Schaub's cousin, was struggling with pain and weakness in her feet around the same time, and was also beginning to have trouble with her mouth. Her dentist had removed teeth and pieces of bone to no avail, as the infection only seemed to increase.
Yeah.
And he too began to suspect phosphorus as the cause of her troubles. Her condition worsened as she became anemic, and she was hospitalized in December of 1922. She told her doctor about Molly Maja's illness and death only a few months before, as well as another friend's similar illness. Hazel Vincent Cuser, who had also worked for the U.S. Radium Corporation, mentioned her earlier, was that friend. And Irene's doctor took it upon himself to report her case as phosphorus poisoning to the Industrial Hygiene Division, who sent an investigator to the plant. So at least, if it isn't, they are at least trying to investigate to see what's going on because these girls, the doctors can talk, but that's about as far as news is traveling. Right?
Okay.
Now, Harold Veit, one of the plant's vice presidents, reassured the investigator that there was nothing harmful in the paint, and the investigator turned the matter and a sample of paint over to the New Jersey Department of Labor, as it was in their jurisdiction at this point.
Okay.
One of their team also visited the plant and was told that the paint was harmless. And this person reported back that the cases of Irene and her friends must be bad coincidences related to poor dental care and treatment.
Massive yikes, bro.
Yeah. Still, the sample of paint was sent to be tested, and the chemist Dr. Martin Zamatolsky wrote back that he was sure that their jaw conditions had been directly caused by radium. This view of radium, we're not done.
Okay.
This view of radium had not been popular, even though there were articles dating back to 1906 about the dangers of radium. A lot of the positive research being done on radium recently, all the good stuff that was being said about radium, was actually being published by those working for the radium firms.
Yeah. It's not independent third-party research.
No. A lot of optimistic articles about radium were given to doctors because there seemed to be a lot of money in the radium medicine business.
They have a fiduciary responsibility to say that radium is not a problem.
So these doctors are thinking that they're reading like legit studies, and these studies are actually coming from the companies.
Oh, man.
So, yay. And you have to be careful, too, even today with unregulated like vitamins and such. Make sure they're like looked at by separate parties other than the ones who are making them.
That's right.
Because they can just put anything in that bottle. It could be sugar.
That's right.
For all you know.
If you notice that little label that'll say, these claims have not been substantiated by the FDA.
Yeah, so...
That's code for, we are not legally responsible for anything that happens to you.
Well, and I just feel like you'd want to know where your stuff's coming from. I like to know that there are studies backing what I'm taking.
Of course.
And I like to be able to see those studies.
And we're not naive to think that, the research institution as a whole across the world is free of bias and free of, its faults.
Well, that's why you have peer review.
Of course, that's what that's supposed to do. We understand that there's humans involved. So, of course, there can still be errors or biases or what have you involved in, peer-reviewed, the highest statistical strength research studies. But the institution exists because of the situation we're describing.
Yeah, and with peer review, you have people looking over your work and holding you accountable.
That's right. Their credibility depends on them telling you the truth about your work.
Yeah. So it's not just one person writing something and you have to trust that person. Other people are checking behind them and things like that. That's so it's important. But in this case, they weren't doing that. So
nope.
So while this chemist warned this guy that did the test and said that it was the radium causing the problems, he warned that every operator working with the stuff be told and protected this would go unheeded. The message just didn't.
They literally made no changes.
Yeah, I don't know if the message got lost or what, but they just didn't. Whatever.
And I'm wondering what kind of regulatory power the Department of Labor has at that moment.
Yeah. They were also, I'm pretty sure the Department of Labor was also pretty pro-business at this point.
I would think so.
So, even George Willis, one of the original co-founders of the Radium Corporation, had just recently written an article for the Journal of the American Medical Association.
Oh, dear.
That radium could cause serious health issues. Now, we recognize the Journal of the American Medical Association as being something big, but back then it was not something that was like, it's not like it was today.
No.
So it's not like people are like have instant access to this kind of information like they do today.
No.
This was, of course, after his own troubles, after having recklessly handled radium, including having his thumb amputated because of cancer.
Oh, boy.
Now, Irene Rudolph underwent operations and blood transfusions, racking up medical debt without success. She died July 15th, 1923, at 21 years old. Her cause of death was labeled as phosphorus poisoning, even though recent tests had shown there was no phosphorus in the paint.
Yeah.
Her jaw had basically disintegrated. Another of the former dial painters, Helen Quinlan, had also died on June 3rd, 1923. The cause of her death was listed as Vincent's angina. which is an angina that has to do with a bacterial infection that starts in the gums and spreads to the throat. That sounds familiar.
Yes.
Yeah. No lab test could prove this diagnosis, however. They were just basically going on symptoms.
Mm-hmm. So the oral symptoms and, the disease showing up in the oral area is because they were touching it to their
Likely,
lips.
yeah.
They were orally ingesting the radium.
Yeah, and it's going to be going. You have to remember, it's like mucous membrane, so it's going to be getting in there pretty easily.
It's absorbing through the lining of the mouth.
And it travels to wherever the bones are. It's going to go to bones all over.
Right. And
but the closest is where it's at, is right there. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
More girls were having similar symptoms, including Grace Fryer, who was having teeth extracted and lingering infections, as well as back and feet problems. Catherine Schaub, who was suffering her own battle with her teeth and jaws, as well as her mental health, which I imagine we all would at this point, watching your friends die of this, and then you start having the symptoms that they're having, and doctors have no idea what's going on. And yeah. So her mental health was deteriorating quickly after having witnessed her cousin Irene's illness and death. And I imagine she felt pretty bad at one point too, because she's the one that got her this job, even though none of it's her fault. Like, yeah, she helped her get this job.
Right. She was just trying to help a friend.
Yeah. Now, Marguerite Carlo, who was still working at the plant, was also having problems with her teeth. She went to a dentist who advised that 2 especially painful teeth be removed then and there. Upon the extraction of these 2 teeth, however, part of her jawbone also came out. Oh, no. Just decayed beyond belief. After hearing of several complaints and investigations, the president of the company, Arthur Roeder, decided to investigate the matter himself. The company was receiving bad press, and some of the current workers were now nervous to continue working. There was even talk of lawsuits for compensation. He fully believed that the paint and radium were harmless. So he asked a Dr. Cecil Drinker, who was a professor of physiology at Harvard School of Public Health, to test it himself. He was so sure. He was like, yeah, we'll just have it tested by someone who really knows what they're talking about. This would take time, and during that time, they did their best to dispel rumors of the plant not being safe. Vice President Veit also visited the dentists of some of the girls that some of the girls had seen, and they advised him to shut the plant down, which they didn't do.
Of course. Kudos to the dentist for telling them the truth.
Yeah, and then I really recommend the book Radium Girls by Kate Moore, because you really get a lot of the dialogue. It's written in more of a narrative format, and it's really, really good.
Oh, that is interesting.
It's
you mentioned that before.
Yeah.
Okay.
It will make you feel things. For sure.
It certainly made you feel things.
Yeah.
And then you told me the things.
Yes. Now, because the Department of Labor wasn't doing anything, Catherine Wiley was called in. She was the executive assistant of the Consumers League, which is an organization that fought for better working conditions for women.
Oh, all right.
And she was she would hound these people. The deputy commissioner of the Department of Labor, John Roach, did give Wiley names of the women affected so far. His boss at the Department of Labor, which, as I said earlier, was pretty pro-business at this time, was not told, and he would later become very angry at Mr. Roach for giving these names over. 2 more dial painters had died, and more were coming down with distressing symptoms. Now back to this Dr. Cecil Drinker and his tests. In May of 1924, he and his wife, Dr. Catherine Drinker, showed up to the plant to look around and perform some tests on the workers. Marguerite Carlo was there, though she no longer worked there, with her sister. They called her up to let her be one of the ones tested or something. Oh.
Wow.
Sarah Mellifer, who was another previous dial painter, who now needed a cane to walk. That was her sister.
Yeah.
They took note of how ill the girls looked, as well as the lesions on the chemist's hands in the lab. They also met with the affected girls' doctors and dentists. So they were trying to do a well-rounded study here.
Yeah.
They completed and delivered a full report to the firm, who in turn sent only part of that report to the Department of Labor.
Ooh.
And this part seemed to clear the company.
Ooh. Somebody's on the inside playing dirty.
They did not, however, publish the full report. It turns out the part of the report they did not send included Dr. Cecil Drinker writing, "We believe that the trouble which has occurred is due to radium." It was also written that so great an incident of these employees of this unusual disease cannot be a coincidence, but must be dependent on some type of bone damage occasioned by the employment. The drinkers also concluded that the only constituent of the luminous material which can do harm must be the radium.
Yeah.
Catherine Schaub continued to see doctors even as far as New York, where she bumped into her old friend and coworker at the dial company, Hazel Vincent Kuser, who was also there to see the same oral surgeon, Dr. Theodore Bloom. So these ladies are traveling all over to see doctors and trying to get the care they need. And it's like, it's frustrating. It's very frustrating and expensive.
And this is before like employee-sponsored health insurance plans.
Oh, yeah. They weren't paying for nothing.
You're just paying out of pocket for all this.
That was the summer of 1924, and Hazel was with her mother as she had a swollen lesion on her face the size of a football.
Oh, my God.
And could not talk. Dr. Bloom would later describe Hazel as having a face that was swollen with quote-unquote pus bags and a jaw that was quote-unquote moth-eaten.
Oh, no.
Dr. Bloom also addressed the American Dental Association about a jaw necrosis problem that he was ready to call radium jaw. He firmly believed the Radium Corporation was lying about not being to blame and had already tried getting them to cover expenses for her care. Like, he went to them and said, "You should be covering for this."
Yeah.
They refused, and he promised his patient all necessary assistance should court action be brought versus the company. That was his words. It would not be long, however, that Hazel would be rushed to a hospital for 3 months of intensive care. It was Thanksgiving of that year when she was released home, but she was still in very poor shape. A priest who had come to visit and give spiritual support said she suffered excruciating agony. She died December 9th, 1924. Her body was in such bad condition that no one was allowed to view it at the funeral. Okay. It was also in 1924 that Quinta McDonald saw an orthopedic doctor about her hip. She was struggling to care for her children at this point and to get around. She complained of one leg feeling shorter than the other.
Oh, boy.
So the doctor took x-rays and found this white mottling of the bone. So they're still trying to like figure out what all this white stuff is. Like, why is it causing this cloudiness on the x-rays? And they're still trying to work that out too.
Yeah. There's radium in her bones. Yeah.
It's destroying them. In February of 1925, when they finally found a lawyer to take the case, a suit was finally brought against the United States Radium Corporation by Marguerite Carlo for the sum of $75,000, which would be about $1 million today, because of all the medical expenses they'd racked up.
Yeah.
Now, it was later, just keeping that in mind, later on, Catherine Wiley, that Consumers League lady, she found out about the fraudulent report that was sent to the Department of Labor. I'm talking about they only sent part of it.
The executive assistant?
Yeah.
Let's go. Okay.
And she passed the info along to a friend of the drinkers who also worked at, I think, Harvard, who in turn told the drinkers, those doctors who had performed the study, about the misrepresentation of their work. And the drinkers were furious.
Ooh.
And Dr. Catherine Drinker called Arthur Roeder, quote unquote, a real villain.
Ooh.
It came out that the only reason that the drinkers themselves had not published their report to the public yet was because they thought it best to have Roeder's consent to do so. Now, at this point,
Sure.
At this point, though,
Cue Lee Greenwood with "Proud to be an American."
So Dr. Drinker made him a deal. I won't publish the report if you send a full copy to the Department of Labor. Like, he gave him this ultimatum: send it or I'm publishing it. Instead, Mr. Roeder passed the report request to the company's lawyers that he had hired to help with this new case, right?
Smart man.
Which now also was not only with Marguerite on it, it now included Hazel Vincent Kuser's name for compensation.
Class action at this point, or?
Yeah, well, I mean, her family was filing it after her death, so.
Okay.
Yeah. Roeder then hired a Dr. Frederick Flynn to investigate the matter, knowing that he had helped the Ethel Corporation in 1925 to find evidence that leaded gas was safe.
Okay.
Do you remember our talk about lead?
Yes.
And how lead is not safe?
It is not.
Well, this quote-unquote doctor was like, yeah, I can help you. So he just wanted somebody to help, protect the company. He wants to protect the company. He doesn't care.
Of course, he has a fiduciary responsibility to protect the company now.
Now, the plan was to have Dr. Flint do his own exams on the girls working at the firm to prove that nothing there was making them sick. Now, if you read this book, you're going to see them they take these girls into a room and do these exams on them, and it just feels incredibly. It would not be legal to do it the way they did it. Okay, today.
What do you mean?
That you just walk into a room and you just unclothe and they just do all these things, and even some of the girls were like, I'm not even sure what I was supposed to be doing, and it's like it feels awful when you read it at that part. It's like that would not be allowed today.
Okay.
Yeah. Of course, only the firm would be able to view the results of any tests. Not even the girls were allowed to know anything other than, quote unquote, you are in perfect health, which is exactly what Dr. Flint told Edna Bowles' husband, even though she was having pain in her knees and had been working for years now as a dial painter.
Mm-hmm.
Now, during all of this, more girls were getting sick and dealing with agonizing pain in their jaws, shoulders, knees, feet, basically anywhere radium could have infiltrated their bones. Catherine Shaw was now having GI issues, gastrointestinal issues.
Mm-hmm.
She could not keep solid food down. She had to have abdominal procedures. Grace Fryer's problems had spread to her back, and they also, all of them, struggled financially because of medical bills and needing assistance at home because they could no longer care for their kids or do the housework or any of that.
It's disabling them.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Some, like Albina Maja, suffered losses in the form of not being able to have children, and many like her suffered miscarriages and stillborn births.
Oh, no.
Some were placed in immobilizing plaster casts, and others were fixed to metal braces just to support them, to keep them upright. More girls were misdiagnosed and died while the company they had worked for continued to deny that it was their fault. The girls were literally rotting from the inside out.
Yeah.
Something would soon change, however. And I think I should leave it there.
Ooh.
Because I think...
Ooh.
Now, I want to say we've talked about the girls in this one location, Newark, New Jersey.
Okay.
I'm also going to talk about a different location in the upcoming episodes because it wasn't only in New Jersey this was happening.
Yes.
So we're going to mention a whole different company that is, different, but not that different. And a different group of girls. And I also want to walk you through what happens to the rest of our players that are still alive and how they figured out what was going on with them and how they dealt with it medically and how they dealt with it legally. Because it's a doozy.
I'm excited. Well, thank you so much for listening, everybody. That's going to do it for this episode. This is Radium Part 1.
Yeah.
So next episode will be Part 2.
And do come back.
Please do.
It gets crazy. But now you know what radium does in the body, why it's dangerous. And now we're going to talk about some more history to do with it when we come back.
Yes. Don't forget to follow us on whatever platform you're listening. Leave a 5-star review. That helps push the podcast further into the algorithm of all the platforms. And consider monthly support for us. We really appreciate that. Also, make sure you follow the podcast Instagram account, Poisoners_Almanac on Instagram. But even if you never do any of that, your listenership is more than enough for us. And we'll see y'all in the next one.
Bye.
Bye-bye.